Hi, this is going to be another short video about the fourth synoptic element. Obviously, we've seen how well short videos by me have went in the past, so we'll see how this one goes. This one will be short, not for the same reason that nature nurture was, because you've covered the most of it, but this one's going to be short rather because it's such a bigger concept that we need to look at. We'll build a lot more on it over the course of the second year, but obviously you need to learn that second year stuff before we can really talk about this concept of social control in depth. So all I'm going to do is give you a rough overview today, ask you to do a little bit of research on a couple of things, and then we'll discuss it in class. Even the stuff in class is going to be fairly brief. I want to spend half of the lesson probably on the research that I want you to be doing over the summer and working a bit on tasks to do with that. So again, this is just very much a taster of social control, which is honestly quite an interesting topic if you really get into the debating side of it. So by the end of this, you'll be able to describe the concept of what social control is using some examples and discuss it, or at least be aware of the kind of the four areas that we look at it in. The examples that I'm going to be using on this video and in class, because they're very good examples, it comes in at A2, and partially because you should be fairly interested in it, is going to be looking at kind of mental illness. So, social control. Social control exists because without it, many people argue that society would be in a state of chaos. You need a certain degree of order within society for this to happen. And where social control comes from is powerful members of society in one of two ways. Informal social control, such as negative comments, being looked down upon, society's judgments, and formal social control, so organisation and rules. So we'll look at the second one to start with, formal social control. And again, I'll use the example of mental illness. So in the UK, we've got the Mental Health Act. So if you go to the doctors and you're suffering from symptoms that may be linked to a mental illness, you may go along and be diagnosed with, say, schizophrenia or depression and things like that. If you agree with that, that's fine and dandy. Yeah, they'll give you the medication, they'll give you the help that you need, and that should be, you'll be a patient in their care. However, if you disagree with that, that's where things start getting interesting and we can start talking about social control. So say that you have been diagnosed with anorexia or schizophrenia and you choose not to be treated. Doctors can force you to be treated. If two doctors agree with the diagnosis and say that you need help, they can force you to take medication, they can force you to go to hospital, totally against your will. Now remember, this isn't the same as any other illness out there. If you've been diagnosed with cancer and you refuse to be treated, and it is 100% certain that you will die, that's still your choice. You can choose not to be treated. Whereas with mental illness, it can be forced upon you. Yeah? That's a form of formal social control. There's something in the law which says this is how people will be treated. However, with informal social control, it gets a bit more tricky as well. We can talk about very much things about the doctor diagnosing you in the first place. Yeah? He has decided that your behaviour is abnormal, or your behaviour is different, or indeed that your behaviour is an illness. We'll look at a few examples below this about how some people argue that doctors or the society has now over-medicalised certain things. So you can be addicted to the internet, you can have sex addiction, you can have an anxiety disorder caused by social situations. It is seen as a medical illness, whereas others argue that it's just shyness. Yeah, and what we're trying to do is put control in place to make people fit into what our ideas of normal are. And informal social control doesn't even have to come from doctors or from people in power. So let's say that your doctor has prescribed you medication for schizophrenia, and you decide that you don't want to take it. Again, many people argue that should be your free choice, but if you've decided not to take that, it could cause other people to look down on you or to treat you negatively because of that. Yeah, the doctor, who is, remember, an expert, the person who knows this sort of thing, has made a decision about how you should be treated. If you therefore refuse to do that, it can make many people feel like they're being victimized by society or being looked down upon for that choice. And again, it comes down to the idea, some people argue that you do have a choice, whereas others argue that that shouldn't necessarily be a choice, and doctors have the right or have the responsibility to be telling you what you should be doing to get better. So this comes down again, remember French and Raven's types of power. And we looked at this when we looked at an alternative theory to Milgram's agency theory. And there's the different types of power. Many of these are held by doctors, by teachers, by government officials and things like that. And what we're obviously looking at is psychologists in particular. So therapists and doctors, they have expert power. And we'll talk about whether they have a right to have that. Should they have reward power and coercive power and things like that? So there's big questions that we have to answer as we go through with all of this. So who should have the power to control someone's behaviour? Yeah? Should doctors have that right? And what I'll probably ask you to do as well is a quick questionnaire at the bottom where I'll just ask you literally for your opinion on this matter. So should a doctor be able to diagnose you as having a mental illness, even when you disagree with them? Yeah? Do they have the expert knowledge that their views or their opinions should override yours? Right, so we'll look at that. Part of this is also when is control appropriate. If you are no harm to someone and you have schizophrenia, should we leave you be? If the doctor decides that you are a danger to society or to other people, should we then step in? But again, is that not just due to his subjective opinion? So is that not him forcing an opinion on you? This cover of book, The Myth of Mental Illness, is by Thomas Szasz. Thomas Szasz is someone that you will get sick of me mentioning next year. And Thomas Szasz believed that there is no such thing as mental illness. He said that some people heard voices in their head and had schizophrenia, I'm doing inverted commas again, and other people didn't. But what had happened is those that didn't had ganged up and decided that those that did hear voices made them uncomfortable, so they would punish them. He saw all mental illness as just being a breaking of social norms. You are doing something that other people don't see as being correct or right, and so they punish you for it. Remember, up until 1967, being gay was seen as a mental illness because it broke the social norms that society had agreed, or powerful members of society had agreed. So we'll talk a lot more about him. Again, I'll give you a link at the bottom so you can look up a bit more about him. And we need to discuss what means are appropriate to control someone else's behaviours. So there are various different treatments we'll look at. So we can talk about, obviously we looked at aversion therapy in the first year. Is that an appropriate behaviour? If you're a drug addict, should we be causing you pain to stop you being addicted to drugs? Or alternatively, even kind of odder conclusion, when somebody's addicted to heroin, we might give them morphine instead. Is it right to trade off one drug for another? And is that not just us saying that one drug is acceptable and the other drug is not, which is again a form of social control based on our opinions? Then it goes even further and we look at other behaviours. And we've got obviously therapies that their entire purpose is to change the way that you think. Now, is that a good thing to be doing? Should we try to change the way people think, even though, again, we're doing it because we think we're doing good? Yeah? Psychologists are trying to help people, but by doing it, are they enforcing their views and their beliefs on others? Again, who should be controlled? So this is similar to that. At what point should we install control? So should drug addicts be forced into treatment? Yeah, they've made a choice to take drugs, and obviously these are illegal. But again, they're illegal because some people have decided that they are illegal. And then there's the idea that now that drug addiction is a medical problem. So we treat people, whether they want to be treated or not, because it's seen as a medical cure that we're trying to do. So there's four main areas in psychology that we look at social control within in the second year. So the first one is drug therapy. So again, that's a little bit about drug therapy. And we discuss, again, are there ethical and practical problems in using drugs to control people? If we alter your brain chemistry with medication, with drugs, is that something that we should be doing, even though we can do it? Token economies, again, coming back, and we talked about these briefly in the first year. We'll do a lot more in the second year. It comes up 2 or 3 times in the syllabus. And we'll talk about, is it right to change your behaviour? Yeah, and the entire point of the token economy is to change the behaviour that you are showing. So, should we have that right? Especially when it comes to things like, say, for example, anorexia, what we might do is we might withhold visits from your family. If you're in a hospital, we might withhold visits from your family, and you're not allowed to visit them until you fit in with our schedule of meals and things like that. Some people argue that that is controlling your life to too much of a degree, that you have a right to interact with your family. So even though we are trying to help again by holding back on rewards until you have a healthy, again inverted commas, behaviour, some people argue that there are ethical and practical problems with that. Classical conditioning, again, the example of aversion therapy, much from the first year, and we'll expand on that more. And finally, the power of the practitioner themselves. So again, should therapists have all the power in diagnosing what a mental illness is and how it should be treated? Should they have the power to section you? So as I said, underneath this, there's going to be a few links to some articles for you to read. I'm going to ask you to do a task on research and then just a quick summary of some of your thoughts and ideas. In class, we'll look at it a lot more, and we'll be able to discuss it properly in person, one-to-one, or one to the class. And I'll get you to do a quick summary work on this before we look at things that I want you to be doing over the summer. Right, so thanks for listening.